I was sitting on my porch in suburban Seattle, cradling a mug of dark roast, trying to savor the rare morning peace. Autumn leaves drifted past, scattering over the damp steps. My phone buzzed with a familiar ringtone. Seeing Madison's name flash on the screen, I couldn't help but smile. My daughter, always so driven, usually too busy for calls during the week. I was ready for our usual chat, a small comfort that stitched the distance between us. But the moment I heard her voice, my heart skipped. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," Madison said, her tone uncharacteristically flat. "Of course, honey. What's going on?" I replied, already sensing trouble. There was a brief pause, a silence that felt heavier than the clouds above the sound. "About my wedding," she began. Mom, you're just too old to be there. It's going to be this huge, modern celebration, and I just don't want you there. I hope you understand." Her words landed like a slap. I blinked, expecting a laugh, a joke, but all I heard was finality. My hand trembled around the mug. I couldn't speak. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard, if this was some strange test. But Madison's voice held no warmth, just a cold edge I'd never heard before. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to breathe. Over the years, I'd watched Madison grow from a shy, freckled girl who once clung to my hand on the first day of kindergarten, to an ambitious young woman racing through life: internships, grad school, new friends in the city. I'd driven her to soccer games in the pouring rain, stayed up late finishing Halloween costumes, worked double shifts at the hospital just to pay for her college textbooks. I'd missed my own doctor's appointments to be at every school play, made her favorite pancakes before early exams. I never once asked for thanks. That's just what moms do. And now, with a single phone call, it was like all those years vanished. I hung up and sat on the porch as the steam from my coffee faded into the grey morning air. The house felt emptier than it had since my husband, Mark, passed 3 winters ago. I looked across our quiet street, neighbors walking dogs, kids waiting for the school bus. Life, unbothered by heartbreak. At first, the shock numbed me. But beneath it, something in me shifted. A stubbornness, maybe. Or a sliver of pride that refused to crumble beneath rejection. If Madison thought my age made me invisible, she was wrong. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I spent the rest of that day wandering through memories. The old photos on the mantel, Madison's toothy grin on her first bike, Mark's lopsided smile at her graduation. The dried-out roses from last year's Mother's Day. I remembered the winter when money was so tight I sold my engagement ring just to cover Madison's last semester at the University of Washington. She never knew. I'd kept that secret close, part of the invisible cost of love. By evening, the ache turned into something else, a question. Had I done all this for nothing? Had I really become a stranger to my only child? Just as I started to spiral, the phone rang again. This time, it was my oldest friend, Linda. Her voice was gentle, familiar. "I heard from Karen that Madison's wedding is coming up," she said softly. "Are you okay?" That was all it took. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. I told her everything, how Madison had shut me out, how it felt to be erased by my own daughter. Linda listened, not offering solutions or judgment. Just a patient, loving silence. "You're more than their words, Grace," she finally said, calling me by my middle name the way she always did. "You're the heart of that family. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not even Madison." Her words rekindled a small flame in me. Maybe silence wasn't the answer. Maybe it was time to show everyone, especially my daughter, that age was never a measure of love or worth. That night, sitting at the kitchen table, I made a list of everything I still had: old family photos, Mark's letters from when he was stationed overseas, and my own battered journal full of dreams, poems, and confessions no one else had ever read. As I tucked myself into bed, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It might just be the messy, painful beginning. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the way Seattle often wakes up in October. I forced myself out of bed and brewed another cup of coffee, determined not to let heartbreak keep me from living. The ache was still there, sharp and fresh, but Linda's words echoed in my mind, "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I decided to busy myself with something practical, something grounding. I went up to the attic, where I hadn't been in months, maybe years. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of cedar from old hope chests and Christmas decorations. In the far corner, I found an old wooden trunk with a faded sticker that read "Property of Grace Miller, 1987. It creaked open under my hands, revealing stacks of letters tied with mismatched ribbons, and a handful of black and white photos, memories of a different era. Most of the letters were from Mark, sent during his deployments when Madison was just a baby. I traced his handwriting with my finger, letting myself remember the love that built our family, a love that felt unbreakable, even now that he was gone. But among the letters was a smaller envelope I'd almost forgotten. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, my sister Ava. She'd always been the wild one in the family, moving to California in her 20s to chase dreams and sunsets. We'd lost touch for years, but she'd written to me after Mark's funeral, offering words I was too numb to read at the time. Now, I opened her letter carefully, the paper brittle with age. "Gracie, don't let pride keep you and Madison apart. Families can break apart over things that seem important in the moment, but don't let it happen. Forgive, even if it's hard. Love anyway." Reading those words, I felt a wave of nostalgia and guilt. Had I been too hard on Madison over the years? Had I expected too much? Or was this just the price we pay for loving deeply? At the bottom of the trunk, I found a small, velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold locket, my grandmother's, passed down through generations of women who'd faced heartbreak and kept going. I'd always intended to give it to Madison someday, when she was ready to appreciate the story behind it. I spent the rest of the morning writing. Not just in my battered journal, but a real letter to Madison. I didn't scold or plead. Instead, I tried to tell her the truth about what the locket meant, the resilience of the women in our family, the sacrifices made in silence, the hopes hidden in small acts of love. I included a copy of Ava's old letter, hoping Madison might find wisdom in her aunt's words. By the time I finished, my hand ached, but my heart felt a little lighter. I boxed the locket and the letters together, sealed them up, and drove to the post office in town, dropping the package in the slot with trembling fingers. As I walked back to my car, I felt both exposed and hopeful, like I'd thrown a message in a bottle into the ocean, praying it would find its way home. That night, sleep eluded me. I replayed old conversations with Madison, searching for the moment things had shifted. Maybe it was when she moved out after college, eager for independence. Maybe it was when Mark died and I leaned too much on her, asking for comfort she didn't know how to give. Maybe it was just life, a series of misunderstandings, small wounds left untended. The following days stretched on quietly. I cooked for one, watered my succulents, read old novels I'd neglected. I checked my phone more than I wanted to admit, hoping for a reply from Madison, a text, an email, even a sign she'd received my package. But the silence remained, heavy and stubborn. One evening, Linda called again. She invited me out for coffee at our favorite spot in Ballard, a cozy cafe tucked between a record shop and an art gallery. We sipped chai lattes by the window as rain streaked down the glass. "I know this feels impossible," Linda said, squeezing my hand. "But sometimes distance is how people figure out what really matters. Give Madison time. You keep living your life, Grace. Show her how strong you are." Her advice felt both comforting and challenging. That night, inspired by Linda's encouragement, I decided to make a change, something just for myself. I signed up for a local art class I'd always wanted to try, painting landscapes and city skylines, letting my hands make beauty out of chaos. For the first time in years, I created something just for the joy of it, not for anyone's approval. Meanwhile, I started volunteering at the community center down the street, tutoring girls who reminded me of Madison at 12, bright, awkward, filled with dreams. They listened to my stories and laughed at my old jokes, giving me a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with being a mother, everything to do with being myself. Through all of it, I held on to hope. I reminded myself that love, even when bruised, doesn't disappear. It changes shape, sometimes growing quieter, sometimes waiting for the right moment to speak. And then, one late afternoon as golden light spilled through the kitchen window, my phone rang. My heart skipped when I saw Madison's name, this time followed by a hesitant mom. Her voice was softer than I remembered, uncertain but sincere. "I got your package," she said quietly. "The locket, Aunt Ava's letter. Why did you send it now?" I chose my words carefully, not wanting to scare her away. "Because family is bigger than pride, Madison. Love isn't measured by age or appearances." There was a pause, a shaky sigh. And for the first time in a long time, she began to talk not just about wedding plans, but about her fears, her doubts, the expectations that weighed her down. She told me she felt trapped between who she was and who everyone wanted her to be. As I listened, I realized healing isn't always loud or sudden. Sometimes it begins in quiet, awkward conversations, a willingness to be honest and vulnerable. We agreed to meet soon, face to face. My heart ached with both hope and anxiety. Was this our chance to start over, or another painful goodbye? Either way, I knew I was strong enough to find out. The day of our meeting, the sky over Seattle was its usual moody gray, the kind that makes every light indoors feel extra warm. I dressed with care, not fancy, just a soft blue sweater Madison once gave me, and the same old pearl earrings I wore to her graduation. As I left the house, my hands trembled, but I told myself it was only anticipation, not fear. Madison and I met at a quiet cafe in Ballard, the same one where Linda and I had sat just days before. As I stepped inside, the familiar chime of the door felt almost like a blessing. I spotted Madison immediately. She was sitting by the window, her long hair pulled back, eyes fixed on the rain. When she looked up and saw me, her lips pressed into a tight, uncertain smile. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure whether to reach out or simply sit down. In the end, I slid into the booth across from her and folded my hands, waiting for her to speak. We sat in silence at first, sipping coffee and listening to the hum of conversation around us. It was Madison who broke the ice. "Mom," she began, her voice barely more than a whisper, "I'm sorry. About everything. I know it was harsh, what I said. I've been under so much pressure. From everyone. From myself. I didn't mean to hurt you." My heart clenched at her words. I could see the strain in her eyes, the way her fingers twisted nervously around her mug. For so long, I'd pictured her as invincible, sprinting toward a life I could barely keep up with. Now, across the table, she seemed small and fragile, the same girl who once needed me to chase away nightmares. "I know you didn't," I said gently. "But it hurt, Madison. I've missed you. I've missed us." She looked down, blinking quickly, and I realized she was fighting back tears. "It just feels like nothing I do is ever enough. Like I'm always behind. Planning this wedding, it's like every decision turns into an argument. People keep telling me what my day should look like, who should be there, what music to play, what dress to wear. I thought if I could just control something, anything, it would get easier." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. For a moment, she didn't pull away. "Sweetheart. I spent half my life trying to make things perfect for everyone else. I learned, eventually, that the only thing that matters is the love you put into each day, not whether the napkins match the flowers or if every single guest is happy." Madison gave a short, watery laugh. "You always make things sound so simple. Maybe that's because I've made enough mistakes to know what really matters." There was a quiet between us then, not the cold silence of hurt, but a fragile space where something new could grow. Madison reached into her purse and pulled out the old locket I'd sent her. She held it up, letting the gold catch the cafe's soft light. "I read Aunt Ava's letter," she said. "I cried. I guess. I never realized how much you and Dad sacrificed for me. I've always been so busy running forward, I forgot to look back. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. All I ever wanted was for you to find your own path, even if it was far from me. But Madison, you're never too old or too young for family. We sat for a while, talking in fits and starts about her memories of Mark, about the weirdness of growing up without him, about how scary it is to step into new chapters. I shared stories she'd never heard about how nervous I was the day she was born, how Mark once burned dinner trying to impress me, how my mother had given me the locket the day I left for college with the same hope I'd had for her. The walls between us, built from years of unspoken fears, started to crumble. Madison's face softened, and she reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I'm still not sure what I'm doing, she admitted, her voice steadier now. But I don't want to lose you. Even if the wedding is a mess. Even if I'm a mess. I smiled, wiping a tear from my cheek. Life is messy, honey. But the people who love you will always be there. Even if they have to wait outside the door. Madison laughed for real then, the kind of laugh that comes after a good cry. The tension between us finally eased, and in its place was a cautious hope, a possibility for healing, for starting again. As we finished our coffee, Madison glanced at her phone. I have to get back to work, but would you like to come to the florist with me this weekend? I could use some advice. I mean, you always did have good taste. I agreed instantly, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. As we hugged goodbye outside the cafe, I felt the city breathe with me. The air smelled like rain and promise. I walked home in the drizzle, replaying our conversation in my mind. I knew everything wasn't magically fixed. The wounds between us would take time to heal. But this was a beginning, a fragile truce that could become something stronger. When I got home, I opened my journal and wrote. Today, Madison called me Mom again. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I belong in her life. That night, I slept deeply, dreaming of second chances. The following Saturday, the city woke up under a brilliant sky, all the rain-washed streets reflecting an unfamiliar sunlight. I dressed in my favorite cardigan, tucked Mark's old handkerchief in my pocket, and headed to Madison's apartment in Capitol Hill, a bustling part of Seattle, alive with cafes and street musicians. My heart fluttered with nerves and excitement, half afraid the invitation would vanish, half afraid something would go wrong. Madison buzzed me in herself, a gesture that felt like forgiveness in action. Her place was small but tidy, with little touches of her personality everywhere. Photos from her study abroad trip to Spain, a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, tiny potted succulents lining the windowsill. The smell of coffee and vanilla candles greeted me as I entered, and for a moment, I felt like I'd stepped into her world again. She was bustling around the kitchen, hair pulled up and sleeves rolled, reminding me of how she used to help me bake cookies as a child. I made muffins, she announced, almost shyly. Blueberry. Just like you used to make. The gesture made my eyes sting. I bit back tears and smiled. They smell wonderful. As we ate together, conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected. We talked about little things at first, books, movies, a new Thai place she wanted to try. Then Madison brought up the wedding. Mom, can I be honest with you about something? She asked, pausing to refill our mugs. Of course, sweetheart. Always. She hesitated, then looked at me, her eyes clearer and less guarded than before. I think I let the wedding get too big, too performative. It started as something special, but now it's all about expectations. Adam's family wants a formal ceremony, my friends want something quirky. I keep losing my own voice in the noise. She leaned forward, earnest. But I want you to be there. I do. I was just afraid. Afraid people would judge us, judge me for not being modern enough. That somehow, having my mom there would make me look old-fashioned. Isn't that awful? I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. What's awful is thinking you have to please everyone. Weddings should be about love, not image. You only get this day once, make it yours. And don't let anyone tell you family is out of style. She gave a small laugh, nodding. You're right. I want you there, Mom. I'm sorry for what I said before. I was just scared, and I lashed out at you. Relief washed over me. I hadn't realized how much I'd been bracing for rejection until it finally lifted. I wanted to scoop her up and hug her like I did when she was 6, but instead, I squeezed her hand tighter and just smiled. Thank you, Maddie. We spent the rest of the morning planning flowers and table settings. Madison asked for my advice on centerpieces, and I suggested wildflowers, simple, colorful, a little imperfect. She loved the idea, scribbling notes in her wedding planner. We even joked about using Mark's old records as part of the decor, a nod to the dad she missed as much as I did. Later, we visited the florist together, poring over peonies and eucalyptus, debating the merits of roses versus ranunculus. Madison chatted with the owner, a cheerful woman named Laura, and by the end of our visit, we'd picked out arrangements that felt joyful, not pretentious. As we left the shop, arms linked, I felt the world opening up again. The old ache between us had softened, replaced by something more hopeful, a sense that our relationship could evolve, become deeper, more adult, even as it healed. But even as things grew brighter, there were shadows I couldn't ignore. That evening, back at home, I called Linda and told her about the day. She was delighted, of course, but her voice carried a quiet warning. Give her time, Grace. She's reaching out, but she's still finding her footing. Don't rush it. Let the healing happen at its own pace. I promised I would. Still, old habits die hard. I caught myself anxiously checking my phone every few hours, worried Madison might change her mind, that her doubts might creep back in. One night, the anxiety overwhelmed me. I took out my journal and wrote, "Love is patient, but fear is stubborn. Maybe real forgiveness is learning to live with both." To keep my mind occupied, I poured myself into the art class I'd started. Each week, I painted more confidently, Puget Sound at sunrise, Pike Place Market with its crowds and chaos, wild roses growing along the Burke-Gilman Trail. The instructor, a cheerful retiree named Carol, praised my sense of color. "Are you sure you haven't painted before?" she teased one evening as I cleaned my brushes. I laughed. "Only in my imagination." My days started to fill with small joys again, coffee with Linda, walks around Green Lake, tutoring at the community center. The girls I mentored there reminded me of Madison, stubborn, hopeful, still deciding who they wanted to become. I poured all my unused motherly energy into them, and in return, they filled me with laughter and a sense of purpose. As the wedding date crept closer, Madison called more often. Sometimes it was about cake flavors or music playlists, other times just to chat about work, her friends, or a book she was reading. The distance between us, once a gaping chasm, now felt like something we could cross, one conversation at a time. Still, every step forward felt fragile. I knew there would be setbacks, moments when fear or pride got in the way. But for the first time in a long while, I believed we could weather them together. One afternoon, Madison sent me a text. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. Can't wait to see you this weekend. Love you." I stared at the message, tears stinging my eyes, and smiled. Maybe, just maybe, love was enough after all. With each passing week, Madison and I fell into a rhythm, calls about the wedding, quick texts with photos of flower arrangements, even the occasional Sunday brunch together at a diner we used to visit when she was a child. I cherished every small moment, but I also tried not to lose myself in anticipation. If there's anything I learned in my 50s, it's that happiness has to be built one ordinary day at a time. Meanwhile, my life at the community center became more than a distraction. It became a lifeline. I found myself volunteering extra hours, especially with a group of teenage girls who needed tutoring in math and science. They were bright but wary, each carrying invisible burdens, parents working double shifts, little siblings to care for, the usual weight of wanting to fit in. I saw so much of my younger self in them, and sometimes, just a hint of Madison too. One Thursday, after the girls had left for the afternoon, I stayed behind to help with a community art project, a mural along the center's north wall. The project leader, an energetic woman named Denise, handed me a brush and a small container of turquoise paint. "We could use more hands like yours, Grace," she said. "You have a steady way with these kids." I smiled, warmed by the praise. They remind me of my daughter. And maybe of myself, too. That afternoon, as the sun angled through high windows, I found myself lost in the simple joy of creating something lasting. It felt different from the kind of invisible work I'd always done as a mom, packing lunches, paying bills, worrying in silence. This was something anyone could see. Something that would stay long after I left. Afterward, Denise invited me for coffee, and over our cups, she asked about my life. I shared a little of my story, Mark, Madison, the recent pain and tentative reconciliation. "Sounds like you've been through a lot," Denise said gently. "But you're still here. That counts for more than you know." I walked home under the dusky Seattle sky, the city glowing soft around me. For the first time in years, I felt not just useful, but valued. I promised myself that, no matter what happened with Madison, I'd keep building this new life, one that was mine, not just an echo of someone else's needs. A week later, as I was prepping lesson plans at the center, Madison called. Her voice was tight and uncertain. "Mom, do you have a minute? Can you come by my apartment? Something happened, and I just need you." My heart raced. "Of course, honey. I'll be there soon." When I arrived, Madison looked pale and anxious. She ushered me inside, her hands fluttering with nervous energy. On the coffee table sat a stack of mail, half-opened envelopes, and her wedding planner, pages askew. "What's wrong?" I asked softly, sitting beside her on the worn couch. She took a shaky breath. "Adam's family, they want to invite 100 extra people. His mom says it's tradition, 4 big weddings. The venue says we'll need to pay double, and suddenly, it's not our day anymore. It's theirs. Adam and I got into this huge fight about it, and I feel like it's all slipping away." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in years, she let herself lean against me, sobbing into my shoulder. I held her, stroking her hair, the way I had when she was little and convinced monsters lived under her bed. "It's going to be okay," I whispered. "You don't have to please everyone. If you and Adam want something different, that's your choice. You can say no." Madison sniffled, her voice small. "What if they never forgive me? What if it ruins everything?" I brushed a tear from her cheek. "You can't control everyone's happiness, honey. But you can protect your own. If this day isn't about you and Adam, what's the point? Sometimes the bravest thing we do is disappoint the people who expect too much." She nodded, trying to smile. "You always make things sound simple. It's not simple. It's just worth it." After a long pause, she looked at me, really looked at me. "Mom, I wish I'd listened to you sooner. I spent so long trying to be perfect for everyone. Even for you. Maybe especially for you. I didn't want to let you down." My throat tightened. "You never have. Even on your worst days, you're still my girl. I wouldn't trade you for anyone." The next few hours were a whirlwind. We spread out the wedding planner, made a list of what actually mattered, and for the first time, Madison spoke about her hopes instead of her fears. She wanted laughter, music, simple food, wildflowers, and family, not a pageant, not a show. By evening, her anxiety had softened. Adam came home, looking as rattled as Madison, but when he saw us together, he relaxed. We sat down as a family, awkward at first, but then more comfortably, and talked through the guest list, trimming it to what felt right. Adam called his parents to explain their decision. It wasn't easy, but Madison stood her ground, and when she hung up, she looked taller, steadier. When I left that night, Madison hugged me tightly at the door. "Thank you, Mom. For everything. For not leaving, even when I tried to push you away." I squeezed her back. "That's not how love works. I'll always be here, even when you don't want me to be. As I walked home, a gentle drizzle began to fall, making the streetlights shimmer. I felt proud not just of Madison, but of myself. I'd weathered storms, learned new skills, found new friends. I'd proven to my daughter, and maybe to myself, that age isn't a barrier to love, to courage, or to new beginnings. And I realized, maybe for the first time, that my story wasn't ending. It was unfolding, page by page, alongside hers. Spring finally arrived in Seattle, turning everything lush and green, the city shaking off its long winter with cherry blossoms and bright, chilly mornings. The change in the air felt like a promise. Madison and I were closer than we'd been in years, talking almost daily, sharing meals, even laughing together the way we used to. Sometimes, though, I caught her studying me with a mix of love and guilt, as if she still couldn't quite believe I'd forgiven her. One afternoon, as I was prepping for my art class, I got a message from Denise at the community center. "Grace, are you free to speak at our women's leadership event next month? We'd love you to share your story about resilience, about family." The idea filled me with both excitement and dread. Me? Speak in front of a crowd? It felt risky and exposing. But the thought also made me stand a little taller. I texted Madison, half expecting her to shrug it off, but she replied instantly. "You should do it, Mom. You're stronger than you think." With Madison's encouragement, I said yes. Over the next few weeks, I worked on my talk, writing late into the night after painting or tutoring. I thought about all the things I wished someone had told me when I was younger, the truth about how love isn't a guarantee, how family can hurt you, how forgiveness is a practice, not a feeling. I spoke about Mark, about single motherhood, about the years of invisible sacrifice. About the loneliness that can settle into a house like dust after a loss, and how new purpose can grow in unexpected places. An art class, a volunteer project, a late-night call from a daughter who finally wants to come home. The event itself was small but warm, a cozy crowd of women of all ages, a few familiar faces from the neighborhood. I stood at the front of the room, my hands shaking at first, but as I spoke, I felt the words steady and strong inside me. "I used to think motherhood meant disappearing into the background," I said. "But what I've learned, what my daughter helped me learn, is that every stage of life has its own worth. Your story doesn't end when your kids grow up, or when you lose someone, or when you make a mistake. Sometimes, that's exactly when your real story begins." When I finished, people clapped and a few women came up to thank me, sharing pieces of their own stories, estranged children, marriages that didn't last, dreams rediscovered in midlife. That night, Madison called me, her voice bright with pride. "Adam's mom heard about your talk," she laughed. "She said you're famous now. But honestly, Mom, I'm just so proud of you. I'm really, really lucky to have you." Her words were worth more than any applause. The family gathering. As the wedding approached, a new kind of nervousness crept in, not dread, but anticipation. Madison invited me to a small family dinner at her apartment. Adam's parents would be there, along with his sister and a couple of friends. The thought of meeting them in such an intimate setting made my hands sweat, but I was determined not to let old insecurities get in the way. I arrived early, carrying a homemade peach cobbler, my attempt to win hearts the old-fashioned way. Adam opened the door, all warmth and easy smiles. Madison greeted me with a hug that was quick but real, her eyes sparkling. "You look great, Mom," she whispered. "Don't be nervous. They're just people." Dinner was a cheerful, sometimes awkward affair. Adam's mother, elegant in pearls, peppered me with questions about my life in Seattle and my volunteer work. His father was quieter but kind, chiming in with the occasional dad joke. Madison and Adam bantered about wedding plans, joking about the great guest list debate and how they'd finally landed on a celebration that felt like their own. After dessert, as the conversation shifted to travel stories, Adam's mom turned to me and said, "I hope you know how much Madison values your opinion. She talks about you all the time." The compliment caught me off guard. 4 years, I'd worried I'd become an afterthought in Madison's life, a shadow, not a source of strength. But in that moment, I realized how much had changed. The distance between us, once a canyon, was now just a step. Before I left that night, Adam's mother pulled me aside. "I can see where Madison gets her strength," she said quietly. "You've raised a remarkable woman." Walking home under the stars, the city lights glittering across Lake Union, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Madison had found her path, and I had rediscovered my own. The wedding rehearsal. A week before the wedding, Madison asked me to come to the rehearsal dinner. She wanted me there, not as a guest, but as someone essential. The room was filled with laughter, hugs, and more than a few happy tears. I watched as Madison, radiant and at ease, mingled with friends and family. She caught my eye across the room, and for the first time, I felt no fear, only pride. During dinner, Adam stood and thanked everyone for being part of their story. Madison followed, her voice clear and strong. "There's someone here who taught me how to keep going when things felt impossible. Someone who's shown me that forgiveness, even when it's hard, is always worth it. Mom, thank you for everything." The applause was gentle but heartfelt. I caught Linda's eye. She'd come as my plus one, and she gave me a discreet thumbs up. That night, before bed, I wrote in my journal, "It's never too late to come home. Not for your children. Not for yourself." I fell asleep with the window cracked open, listening to the city and dreaming of beginnings that feel like endings, and endings that blossom into something new. The morning of Madison's wedding arrived clear and bright, a rare, blue sky day in Seattle. Sunlight filtered through my bedroom window, casting golden stripes on the floor as I stood in front of my closet, hands trembling with anticipation. I'd chosen a simple but elegant navy dress, the gold locket resting over my heart. My hair, a little grayer than last year, was pinned up with the same silver clip I wore on my own wedding day. Linda picked me up just after 10, her usual humor settling my nerves. "Grace, you look like you belong on the cover of a magazine," she teased, squeezing my hand. "Today is going to be beautiful. Just remember to breathe and enjoy every minute." As we drove through the city, I let myself savor the sights, the tulips blooming along the median, the familiar shape of the Space Needle against the sky, the ferries moving across Elliott Bay. It felt like the whole city was wishing me luck. The ceremony was in a restored garden on Bainbridge Island, a place Madison had loved since childhood. Rows of wildflowers lined the aisle, sunlight flickering through the leaves. I found my seat, third row, right side, surrounded by friends, neighbors, Adam's family, and Linda, who insisted on snapping photos of everything. When Madison appeared at the top of the path, arm in arm with Adam, she was radiant, her dress simple and perfect, her face lit with a happiness I hadn't seen since she was little. As she walked past me, she glanced over and smiled, her eyes brimming with gratitude and something softer, understanding, forgiveness, love. The ceremony was sweet and honest. Madison and Adam read vows they'd written themselves, promising to walk side by side, to listen, to try, to forgive. When they exchanged rings, I caught Linda dabbing her eyes, and even Adam's father sniffled behind his sunglasses. Afterward, we gathered on the lawn for lemonade and music. Madison introduced me to her friends, who greeted me with warm hugs and stories from college days. Adam's mother came over with a plate of cake, whispering, "You're family now. I hope you know how lucky we all feel." Later, Madison pulled me aside, her hand tight around mine. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for all those months I shut you out. I thought I had to prove something, but all I really wanted was to share this day with you. Thank you for not giving up on me." Tears stung my eyes. "There's nothing you could do to lose me, Maddie. Love doesn't have an expiration date." She laughed, wiping at her cheeks. "I saved you a dance, you know." We twirled across the grass, laughing as we tried not to trip over the uneven ground. Adam joined us, then Linda, then a handful of Madison's old friends. The whole scene felt light, joyful, real. A toast to new chapters. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Adam's father tapped his glass and called for a toast. He spoke about family, about the courage it takes to forgive and try again. Then Madison stood up, her voice clear and steady. "I want to thank my mom," she said, looking right at me. "For loving me even when I pushed her away. For showing me that forgiveness is the greatest gift we can give, and that family is worth fighting for. I hope I'm as strong and kind as you are someday." The applause was soft and sincere. I lifted my glass lemonade, not champagne, and toasted right back. To love that endures. To new beginnings. To never being too old for anything that matters. Home, redefined. The next morning, the house felt quiet but full. The bouquet Madison tossed sat on my kitchen table, petals scattered like confetti. I brewed coffee, opened the windows, and let the fresh air in. There was a text from Madison. "Brunch at our place. Adam's cooking. Bring Linda." I smiled, replying, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Walking down the street later, arm in arm with Linda, I realized how much my world had grown. There would be hard days again, and moments of doubt, but I was no longer the woman afraid to take up space in her own story. I was a mother, a friend, an artist, a volunteer, and a woman with a life still full of promise. As Madison hugged me at her apartment door, I whispered, "Thank you for inviting me back in." She hugged me tighter. "I never want you anywhere else, Mom." We laughed, ate pancakes, and shared stories until the afternoon faded into golden light. The past, painful, messy, beautiful, had shaped us, but it no longer defined us. Now, we faced the future side by side, knowing that every chapter, even the hardest ones, could still end in hope. That night, as I wrote the final lines in my journal, I realized my life was not a story of growing old and being forgotten. It was a story of love that changed shape, found new roots, and kept on blooming again and again, in ways I'd never expected. And as the last rays of sun slipped behind the city, I whispered my own quiet promise. I am here. I am enough. And this is only the beginning.